Hey, what's up guys? I'm really excited today to be reviewing Grid Legends by Feral Interactive. Enjoy. First, let's break down the tech of Grid Legends on iPhone and iPad. The game requires a device with 6GB or more of memory on iPhone and iPad. This means it can support older iPhones all the way back to the iPhone 12 Pro, which I think is an engineering feat. What's interesting is that it's only supported on an M1 iPad or later, or an A17 Pro iPad mini. Grid Legends on iPhone and iPad uses Metal 3.0, just like the Mac version. This is Feral's fourth title on mobile to use this API, along with Total War Empire, Hitman Blood Money, Reprisal, and Alien Isolation. Unlike the Mac version of Grid Legends, which uses TAA plus Metal Effects spatial upscaling, on mobile, the game uses a mix of TAA plus CAS, along with the game's engine's built-in systems. Feral Interactive felt this provided the best fidelity and performance balance. Similar to Feral's prior AAA mobile ports, Grid Legends on iPhone and iPad offers different optimization presets. On offer are graphics, performance, and battery saver, and these are available on the vast majority of all supported devices. Graphics prioritizes graphical fidelity over frame rate. It targets 30 FPS on the majority of devices, with the exception of M4 iPads, which run at 40. And on M2 and M4 iPads, users can enable or disable fireworks and confetti during races. Performance prioritizes a higher frame rate over graphical fidelity. Most devices with this mode will run up to 60 FPS, while the iPhone 15 Pro and M1 iPads run at 40 due to their less powerful chips. The following devices don't have performance mode due to their weaker chips. Battery Saver prioritizes battery life over graphical fidelity and frame rate. This mode targets 30 FPS on everything, and basically the lowest graphics. Unlike the Mac version of Grid Legends, on iPhone and iPad the game does not support HDR. I was informed that running the game in HDR mode impacted the device's temperature and battery life too much, so it's unfortunately not here. But Feral told me, never say never. As we all know, AAA games today typically have pretty large install sizes. Feral told me this is more acceptable on consoles, but less so on mobile devices, which also store photos, videos, music, etc. One of our significant challenges was reducing the install size from approximately 35GB to 12GB, or slightly more if you opt for the HD vehicle textures. The HD vehicle textures are only available on devices with 8GB or more of memory. Grid Legends has cloud saves between iPhone and iPad, but what about between Mac? Sadly, this isn't the case. And it's also not a universal app between all of these devices as well. You'll need to purchase it again if you own it on Mac. Feral told me the universal app model can be a useful mechanism for iOS-only developers who want to reach new users on Mac. However, as long-time publishers of games on both iOS and macOS, the universal app model does not really fit for us. In this specific case, we already have a macOS release of Grid Legends that has been specifically developed for Mac and optimized as a desktop experience. Saved games are not supported between iOS and macOS due to the additional controls and options added to support gaming on touchscreen-based devices. I really hope this can be changed in the future, Feral, considering other recent AAA releases, such as the Resident Evil games, Death Stranding, and so on, support this feature. However, those supported it from the get-go, and this game is a little bit different because it's released on mobile like a year or so later. But it would be cool if it could be added. There are many different ways to play Grid Legends on mobile. First, touch controls. Arrow touch lets you move a vehicle with 2 on-screen arrows. Tilt steer lets you tilt your iPhone or iPad to change the direction of the vehicle. Virtual joystick lets you use an on-screen joystick to change direction. And then obviously you have a brake and accelerate on-screen button and so forth. You can also edit each of these options to further fine-tune the experience. The game also has the option to enable certain features such as auto-accelerate, or auto-brake, or steering assist, and much more. It's incredible the number of options Feral have added for players who prefer playing this way or don't have access to a controller, making it easy to pick up and play. As you'd expect, the game has full controller support, and the UI will change depending on what type of controller you are using. It also has controller rumble support. I am a little disappointed, mind you, that there is no adaptive trigger support for the game at launch. I really hope this can be added in the future, as I think Grid Legends would be a great example of this tech on mobile, and it's been available for quite a while now. I am pleasantly surprised to see the game has full keyboard and mouse support on iPad. All menu interaction works with the mouse, or you can use your keyboard. I don't really like playing races with keyboard controls, just personally. I much prefer playing with a controller, I think the majority of people do, but I'm really impressed Feral have added this. Although I shouldn't be surprised, as they've been adding this feature for years now on their mobile games. Now it's time to look at the game's performance on a range of devices. Please note, for most recordings, I've disabled motion blur, and HUD mode is on minimal for a cleaner image. I'm also going to be testing 5 tracks on each device, with 22 cars. First, let's take a look at the game on my iPhone 16 Pro Max. I first tried the game at Performance Preset. On San Francisco, the FPS dropped once to 55, but otherwise it's locked to 60. Barcelona had some small issues at the beginning of the race, otherwise it was fine. Havana had some frame pacing issues, mainly at the start, but it wasn't that big, and it also dropped to 52 FPS when I crashed a bit later. On the other hand, Okutama Sprint was quite a hotspot for performance drops compared to any other tracks, typically hovering around 40 to 60 FPS. Finally, Strada Alpina was for the most part locked to 60, but occasionally bad frame pacing did occur. This preset also uses only up to about 3.6 GB of memory at peak. During my playtime at this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 45.7 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 93% to 79% within 21 minutes of playtime. Next, we are going to see how the game plays at Graphics Optimisation Preset. I'm happy to report most tracks provide a locked 30 FPS throughout gameplay, even at this higher resolution. There may be some very minor frame pacing issues on some tracks, but without the metal performance HUD, you definitely will not notice this. Tracks that go on for quite a while may have some more heavy issues though. For me, this was Strada Alpina and Akutama Sprint in particular. I've reported these issues to Feral, and they've told me they are aware and recommend using performance mode if you run into these issues. This preset also uses only up to 3.6 GB of memory at peak. During my playtime at this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 43.6 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 100% to 92% within 20 minutes of playtime. Last, let's see how the game plays at Battery Saver Optimisation Preset. You really only need to use this mode if you want to preserve battery. It provides a locked 30 FPS on every track I tested, which is to be expected because it's running the game at very low settings. During my playtime at this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 43.6 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 100% to 92% within 22 minutes of playtime. Moving on, let's see how the game runs on my iPhone 15 Pro. First, Performance preset. Performance on iPhone 15 Pro targets 40 FPS for this mode. On San Francisco, the FPS never went below 40. Barcelona was the same. Havana, again, had no issues hitting the FPS target. Akutama Sprint was, again, quite a hotspot for performance drops, typically hanging around 30 to 40 FPS. Although, I honestly think if you didn't have access to the metal performance HUD, you would not notice this. Finally, Strada Alpina was for the most part locked to 40, but occasionally bad frame pacing did occur. During my playtime at this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 46.7 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 84% to 69% within 22 minutes of playtime. Moving on, we're going to see how the game plays at Graphics Optimization Preset. Unlike my iPhone 16 Pro Max, this preset targets the same resolution. Most maps on my end are locked to the 30 FPS target. Barcelona did drop to 28 FPS once, and some maps had some extremely minor dips. But again, the majority of you simply won't notice this. Sadly, Akutama Sprint has pretty bad results again, but Feral are aware, and I hope they can fix this. Although this is more of an isolated issue in terms of performance, and you shouldn't experience this on any other track, based on my testing. During my playtime at this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 43.6 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 85% to 74% within 23 minutes of playtime. Last, let's see how the game plays at Battery Saver Optimization Preset. This preset targets the same resolution. I don't really know what to talk about here as the game has no issues in this state. You might find you only need to use this mode if you have issues on Akutama Sprint or just don't want your battery to drain as quickly. Anyway, during my playtime at this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 44.6 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 95% to 81% within 21 minutes of playtime. Our last iPhone to look at is my iPhone 12 Pro. Due to the iPhone only having 6GB of RAM, it unfortunately does not support HD vehicle textures for the game, and it also does not have performance mode. So let's see how the game plays at Graphics Optimisation Presets. While the game doesn't look nearly as good as my other iPhones, it really does hold up remarkably well considering that all of this is running on an A14 Bionic chip. On San Francisco, the FPS was locked to 30. Barcelona only dropped to 26 FPS once, otherwise it was fine. Havana dropped to 28 FPS once, otherwise it was perfect. Again, Akutama Sprint was quite a hot spot for performance drops, but it was the only track that had proper problems for me in this mode. Stranda Alpina saw some very minor frame pacing issues. I think it's also worth noting that the game is barely using over 3GB of memory too in this mode. That is great, as it means the game has little chance of crashing due to running out of available RAM. During my playtime at this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 42.2 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 94% to 82% within 20 minutes of playtime. Last, here is Battery Saver Optimisation Preset. This preset targets the same resolution. The difference visually on this phone between graphics and battery saver isn't that noticeable, if I'm honest. So in many ways, this mode is actually kind of good to use if you run into any big performance issues, or you just want to preserve battery life. Anyway, during my playtime at this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 41.5 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 96% to 76% within 24 minutes of playtime. Next, it's time to move on to my iPads. Up first is my iPad Pro 11-inch with M4 and 16GB of RAM. First, we're going to see how the game plays at Performance Optimisation Preset. Can M4 provide you with a locked 60 FPS? Based on my testing on 5 different maps, yes. It's a wonderful experience playing Grid Legends on M4 iPad Pro at Performance Preset. It's running at a fairly high resolution too, and a higher model quality and effects compared to other iPhone and iPads. It looks great. During my playtime at this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 38.9 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 98% to 82% within 20 minutes of playtime. 38.9 degrees here is, in my opinion, a really good temperature, and the device never throttled, and that's awesome. Also, using under 4GB of memory at these settings is great optimization too on Ferrell's end. Graphics Optimisation Preset is great on M4 iPad Pros too, as it provides 40 FPS. I think I actually prefer playing the game at this preset on this iPad. The difference between 40 and 60, in my opinion, is small.
Let's rein it in. You push them over the edge there.
While it's running at the same resolution, it's now running the game at the highest graphics possible, and you can have fireworks and confetti during races enabled. What you might find if you enable this setting is that having fireworks and confetti can provide some very minor frame pacing issues on more challenging tracks. But I still think it's worth having this enabled. It's not always noticeable, but it's a little bit of an added bonus. I think it's really cool that this mode also doesn't go over 4 GB of memory too. During my playtime at this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 43.3 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 100% to 89% within 17 minutes of playtime. I don't really recommend using battery saver optimization on M4 iPads. It's only necessary to save battery. That's it. The lower video settings are quite noticeable on this device, especially if you have a 13-inch iPad Pro. It's still good that this mode is here though, if you want to use it. Moving on, this is my iPad Air 11-inch with M2. First, we're going to see how the game plays at performance preset. This preset targets a lower resolution on this iPad Air. So, are you provided with a locked 60 FPS throughout gameplay? Let's see. San Francisco track was locked to 60. Barcelona track had some very minor dips.
Your teammates been involved in a crash.
Tracks that go on for a while may have some small issues. For me, this was Strada Alpina and again Akutama Sprint in particular, although the drop in performance is nowhere near as noticeable as my iPhone 16 Pro or iPhone 15 Pro. So if you don't have access to the Metal HUD, which is probably the majority of you, you're not going to notice the drop in performance. During my playtime at this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 42.5 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 98% to 85% within 20 minutes of playtime. Next, here is Graphics Optimisation Preset. M2 iPad Airs target a high resolution similar to my M4 iPad Pro, and you can also enable fireworks and confetti during races, just like the M4 iPads. I'm happy to report this preset runs perfectly on my M2 iPad Air. No issues. Using under 4 GB of memory is really cool too. If you're comfortable playing a racer at 30 FPS, I strongly recommend this mode as it's running at similar settings to M4 iPad Pro at graphics. During my playtime at this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 38.5 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 100% to 89% within 22 minutes of playtime. Last, Battery Saver Optimization Preset. Again, I only suggest this mode if you want to save battery life. During my playtime with this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 36.2 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 93% to 89% within 18 minutes of playtime. Our last iPad to look at is my iPad Pro 11-inch with M1 and 16GB of RAM. First, we're going to see how the game plays at Performance Preset. This preset also targets a resolution of 1408 by 984 on this 11-inch iPad Pro. I'm incredibly happy to report this mode runs perfectly on my end on all of the 5 tracks I tested. It never went below 40 FPS, which is awesome. I think this is really good results. Obviously, running at a lower FPS is a great idea for the older M1 chip, and I'll say it again, the difference between 40 and 60 is just not noticeable to the average person, in my opinion. You'll have a great time playing with this preset if you have an M1 iPad. During my playtime at this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 40.0 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 96% to 80% within 21 minutes of playtime. Next, let's see how the game plays at Graphics Optimisation Preset. M1 iPads target 30 FPS at a similar resolution to M2 and M4 iPad Pros in this preset. Sadly, you can't enable fireworks and confetti during races on M1 iPads, but not the biggest downside, as it's not incredibly noticeable. I also accidentally enabled motion blur in this recording, but it doesn't really matter because the game runs perfect. On the 5 tracks I tested, it never went below 30 FPS. If you have an M1 iPad with only 8 GB of RAM, you can obviously breathe easy as the game doesn't use, over 4 GB of memory in this state either. During my playtime with this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 39.8 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 93% to 84% within 18 minutes of playtime. Last, Battery Saver Optimisation Preset. Also, I accidentally enabled motion blur in this recording. Obviously, this mode runs at a locked 30 FPS with no issues on any track. Yeah, it runs fine, and you're obviously only going to be using this mode if you want to save battery. During my playtime at this preset, the game reached a max outside surface temperature of 34.1 degrees, and the battery percentage went from 100% to 92% within 18 minutes of playtime. And that was Grid Legends on iPhone and iPad. What do you think of the port? Are you impressed or disappointed? Let me know in the comments. In my personal opinion, I think this is one of the most polished AAA ports on iPhone and iPad yet. And I think it goes without saying, Feral Interactive are the king at bringing top-tier AAA games to mobile, and I can't thank them enough. And what I love most about their ports compared to other AAA releases by Capcom and Kojima and Ubisoft is that they don't offer incredibly advanced graphical options that can be overwhelming to the user and can also cause problems such as apps crashing or users having an unpleasant experience because they are playing too high settings than what their device is actually capable of. I love how they include the optimization presets for performance, graphics, and battery saver, And they have fine-tuned these modes for every single device. I know for a fact that they have painstakingly tested this game on so many devices under so many different conditions, and what we've got here is just a really solid port that I just recommend it. If you're into races, it's good. If you want to have a look at what is possible with AAA gaming on mobile, take a look at it. It's good. It's great. That's all I have to say. I just want to say a big thank you to Feral Interactive for answering a lot of my questions with this video, and also for providing me with a review copy so I could get this game out, get this video out sooner than possible, because they gave it to me. They gave me a review copy of this game like 2 weeks early. So I've been having so much fun with this game for the past 2 weeks. I've put so many hours into it. It's a great game. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Bye.